Welcome to episode 2 of the Ramnadi Online Festival. In episode 1, we traveled along the length of the Ramnadi, right from the mountains in her source region, through villages, through the busy city, right till her confluence. We heard from locals who live in the source region about how the region has changed over the past few decades. We also met Mr. Shailendra Patel, a crusader for the springs of the Ramnadi. Fortunately, he is not the only one fighting for the life of the river. In 2019, Kirloskar Vasundhara initiated the Ramnadi Restoration Mission. 12 organizations came together to form the Ramnadi Restoration Mission, along with 40 organizations and colleges. Over the past year, RRM has introduced the Ramnadi to hundreds of diverse people through its conferences, workshops, and trainings. RRM is driven by its mission to restore the Ramnadi to its past glory. Let's take a look at what the RRM has done over the past 1 year. This is only the beginning of the mission, and we do have a long way to go. Yet we dream of a beautiful, clean river that flows without obstructions. We are able to dream like this because of the inspiring work done by people like Shanta Sabnis. Shanta Tai is a resident of Someshwarwadi on the banks of the Ramnadi, and she works at the National Chemical Laboratory. In 2016, she and a bunch of volunteers adopted a small stretch on the banks of the Ramnadi to work on the vegetation and the cleanliness over there. How did they do this work? How were they able to go back again and again and again when people kept dumping on the banks of the river? Let's find out from Shanta Tai herself.
मी वसुंधरा स्वच्छता माध्यमाच्या अंतर्गत रामनदी स्वच्छतामध्ये सहभागी झाले 2009 पासून. 2009मध्ये या अभियानाची सुरुवात झाली आणि पहिले काही वर्ष अनेक प्रयोग केले, पण खरा त्याला जोम मिळाला किंवा उत्साह मिळाला तो 2016 पासून. 2016मध्ये एक 100 मीटरचा स्ट्रेच निवडला. तिथे पुष्कळ म्हणजे जवळजवळ 2 ट्रक प्लास्टिक त्या नदीपात्रातनं काढलं. पूर्ण नदीपात्र प्लास्टिकने भरून गेलं होतं. नदीच्या जवळ अगदी दुर्गंधी येत होती. एरंडा आणि टणटणी वाढली होती आणि अशी म्हणजे भयानक अवस्था होती नदीची तेव्हा. तर तेव्हा 2 ट्रक प्लास्टिक तिकडनं काढलं आणि नदीशी सुसंगत जास्त करून फळाफुलांची तसेच कर्दळ आणि वाळा अशी नदीला माती धरून ठेवणारी अशी झाडांची लागवड केली आणि नियमित पाणी घालण्यासाठी नियमाने जायला लागलो दर आठवड्यातून 2दा. हळूहळू टीम जमत गेली, झाडं वाढायला लागली आणि आमचा पुढे वाटचाल सुरू झाली. बऱ्याचदा निराशा यायची, लोकांचा कचरा टाकणं थांबत नव्हतं, पळून जावंसं वाटत होतं तिथून. पण येत राहिले कारण समजत होतं की नद्या स्वच्छ करणं जरूर आहे आणि मामांचा निर्धार बघितला. म्हटलं एक व्यक्ती म्हणते आहे नदी स्वच्छ होईल तर मग आपण जायला पाहिजे. अशा ह्यानी जात गेले आणि टीम जमत गेली. पहिल्यांदा मधुभाऊ आले आणि टीमला भक्कम झाली, टीमचा आधार मिळाला आणि मैथिली, अंजली, रजनी, अखिलेश भाई असं नियमित आम्ही यायला लागलो. अनेक प्रयोग केले, घरोघर जाऊन सर्व्हे केला, लोकांना काय वाटतं नदीबद्दल ते समजून घेतलं. जो कचरा वाहक कचरा गोळा करतो त्याच्यासोबत फेऱ्या घातल्या आणि PMCची जी टीम आहे इथे स्वच्छता करणाऱ्या कर्मचाऱ्यांची त्यांच्याशी संवाद साधला आणि त्याचा बराच फायदा झाला. हळूहळू त्यांच्याशी मैत्री झाली आणि त्यांनीही नदीकडे लक्ष पुरवायला सुरुवात केली. नंतर जी झाडं लावली होती फळाफुलांची ती नदीपात्र अर्थातच सुपीक असल्यामुळे ती जोमाने वाढायला लागली, त्याला पेरू लागले, फुलं यायला लागली आणि बरीच नदी आजूबाजूला राहणाऱ्या लोकांनी दखल घ्यायला सुरुवात केली आणि विशेषतः मुलं, सगळी लहान मुलं अगदी 5 वर्षापासून ते 15 वर्षापर्यंतची मुलं आमच्याबरोबर यायला लागली आणि दर शनिवारी एक कल्ला असायचा. मुलं यायची, झाडाला पाणी घालायची, निरनिराळ्या भाज्या लावायची. भाजी लागवड ह्याच्यावर आम्ही लक्ष केंद्रित केलं महिलांना आकर्षित करण्यासाठी. काही महिलाही आमच्यामध्ये सहभागी व्हायला लागल्या आणि मग इथे लक्ष वेधलं गेलं. अनेक कंपन्या, कॉर्पोरेट क्षेत्रातले लोक त्यांच्या CSRच्या माध्यमातून श्रमदान करायला आले. कॉग्निझनची टीम नियमित यायला लागली. नंतर NCLच्या स्टुडंट्सनी काही तिथे प्रोजेक्ट केले, पाण्याचं विश्लेषण केलं. आपण DO टेस्टिंग करायला लागलो. केमिकल फ्री लाईफस्टाईलची ओळख झाली आणि बऱ्याच जणांनी त्याचा सुरुवातही केली की केमिकल्सचे ऐवजी नैसर्गिक नैसर्गिक वस्तू वापरायला. कीर्तनकारांना आपण सहभागी करून घेतलं, स्वच्छता मोहीम आखल्या. असं करत करत आता नदीमध्ये कचऱ्याचं प्रमाण जाणवणं इतकं कमी झालेलं आहे आणि आता ज्यांना काही अभियानाची माहिती नाही ते लोकांकडूनही फीडबॅक मिळतो आहे की रामनदीमध्ये खूप झाडं आता मोठी वाढत आहेत आणि कचराही कमी झाला. नवीन आलेले लोक म्हणजे आधी आलेले आणि बऱ्याच काळानंतर आलेले लोक म्हणायला लागले तर दुर्गंधी येत नाही. या नदीमधले मुख्य अडचणी होत्या लोक टाकणारे कचरा आणि ड्रेनेज आणि ह्याच्यातर्फे येणारं ते सांडपाणी, सिवेजचं मैला पाणी. म्हणजे नदीमध्ये स्वच्छ पाणी जवळजवळ नाहीच येतं आहे, हे मैला पाणी आहे. त्याची दखल शासनाने घ्यावी यासाठी मोठ्या प्रमाणावर हा आमचा मुख्य प्रयत्न होता. कारण ही समस्या दूर झाल्याशिवाय नदी स्वच्छ होणार नव्हती, हे अगदी सरळ गोष्ट आहे. आणि त्या दृष्टीने आणि मामांच्या प्रयत्नाने महापौर, आमदार, खासदार, नगरसेवक यांनी नदीला भेटी दिल्या, प्रत्यक्ष नदीच्या अवस्थेची पाहणी केली आणि त्यांच्यापर्यंत आता ही समस्या पोहोचवण्यात आपल्याला काही प्रमाणात यश मिळालं आहे असं मी म्हणू शकते. आणि बरेच नागरिकही आता ह्याची दखल घ्यायला लागले आहेत. खरं तर आजूबाजूच्या पर्यावरणाचं प्रतिबिंब नदीत पडतं. डोंगर कापले तर नदीचं पाण्याचा सोर्स कमी होतो, झाडं तोडली तर नदी बारमाही वाहणार नाही, नदीत राडारोडा टाकला तर नदीपात्र अरुंद होईल. त्याच्यामुळे जर नदी स्वच्छ खळखळती म्हणजे जिचं पाणी आपण पिऊ शकतो अशी जर वाहत आहे तर ह्याचा अर्थ नदीचं आजूबाजूचं पर्यावरणही सुरक्षित आहे असं होतं. 2016 साली आपण हा जो 100 मीटरचा किनारावर फोकस केलं तो निवडला, कारण आपल्याकडे जेवढी मॅनपॉवर होती, आपली जेवढी ताकद होती त्या अनुषंगाने आपण 100 मीटरच्या किनाऱ्यावर फोकस करू शकत होतो. आणि त्यावेळेला जे मनात ठरवलं होतं की ह्या नदीपात्र नक्की कसं असायला पाहिजे, आपल्या मनाप्रमाणे म्हणजे आपल्या डोळ्यासमोर कसं असायला पाहिजे, त्याप्रमाणे बरंचसं यश आत्ता मिळालेलं आहे आपल्याला. कारण नदीच्या काठानी जो प्लास्टिक आणि कचरा होता त्याच्या जागी आता निरनिराळी झाडं, जांभूळ, आंबा, वड, पिंपळ, नंतर चाफा, कडीपत्ता, कर्दळ, वाळा अशी जोमाने वाढत आहेत. त्यांना फळं येत आहेत, फुलं येत आहेत, भाज्या काही ठिकाणी लोक पिकवत आहेत आणि बऱ्यापैकी आता स्वच्छ झालेलं आहे. आता लोक नदीपात्रात कचरा टाकायला बिचकत आहेत.
Shantatai and the volunteers' work has begun bearing fruit as people change their minds very slowly about dumping on the banks of the river. Did you know that when a big piece of plastic is put into the river, it starts disintegrating to form small, tiny pieces of microplastic which eventually get into our food and water? Anyway, moving on, Shantatai mentions Manasarki Nadi, which means a river of her dreams. What could this river be? How could the Ramnadi of our dreams look like? We look into the past to plan for the future of the Ramnadi. We have with us advocate Nitin Kokate, who has lived on the banks of the Ramnadi all his life. He talks about the abundance that the Ramnadi brought to the lives of the people who lived on her banks. Today, though we can't even imagine touching the waters of the Ramnadi, we can at least think about what the Ramnadi might have been through stories like the ones advocate Nitin Kokate shares.
पाषाणला एकमेव नदी म्हणजे रामनदी आणि रामनदी म्हणजे आमचं बालपणाचं वैभव. पाषाणचं प्रसिद्ध ऐतिहासिक तळं आहे, त्या तळ्यापासून तर सोमेश्वरवाडीपर्यंत आम्ही रामनदी आमच्या वाट्याला यायची. तर ते पाषाणचं जे प्रसिद्ध तळं आहे त्याच्यानंतर एक सापडोह म्हणून एक मोठा डोह होता, त्याच्या खालोखाल एक आंबेडोह म्हणून एक डोह होता आणि नंतर वाकेश्वराच्या तिथला जो परिसर देवळाच्या तिथला की तिथं अख्ख्या गावातल्या स्त्रिया वगैरे कपडे धुणं वगैरे सगळ्या गोष्टी करायला अख्खं गाव जमायचं त्यावेळेला. तर माझ्या त्या काळामध्ये जवळपास पाषाणमधले 80% मुलं ही आंबेडोहामध्ये पोहायला शिकली होती. म्हणजे किती स्वच्छ आणि अगदी छातीभर डोके बुडेल एवढं पाणी तिथे असायचं. आणि सापडोह याच्यामध्ये फार मोठी मुलं पोहायला जायची, कारण तिथे सूर मारून पोहायला लागायचं. फार खोलवर अगदी 15-20 फुटाची खोली असलेला तो सापडोह होता की ह्या गोष्टी आत्ता कालांतराने चिखलाने भरून गायब झालेल्या आहेत. हे कोणाला सांगूनही पटणार नाही की इथे डोह होते आणि इथं आम्ही पोहायला शिकलो आहे. प्यायच्या पाण्याचं सुद्धा तिथे एक वाकेश्वरा मंदिरातला जिवंत झरा होता. तिथे एक आड होता वाकेश्वराचा की जो अद्यापही आहे. हो, आड म्हणजे आमच्या शाळेच्या ह्याच्यामध्ये निम्म पाषाण गाव हे तिथे पाणी भरत असायचं, पिण्याचे पाणी. आणि ज्या दिवशी कॉर्पोरेशनचं पाणी जायचं त्या दिवशी ऑलमोस्ट संपूर्ण पाषाण गाव त्या आडावर पाणी भरायचं आणि कधीही त्या आडाची पातळी 1 फुटाने सुद्धा खाली गेली नाही किंवा ते अगदी नारळासारखं ते मधुर पाणी कधीही तिची चव आयुष्यात बदलली नाही. असं ते अगदी औषधी पाणी पिऊनसुद्धा आम्ही ह्या बालपणी मोठा झालो आहे. आणि पाषाण जेव्हा उद्योगधंद्याला लागलं वीट धंद्याच्या अगोदर, त्यावेळेला अगोदर पूर्णपणे शेतीवर अवलंबून होता की पाषाणचे भाव प्रामुख्याने एक निमनमळा, कोकाटेमळा वगैरे असे जर का विभाग पाहिले तर तर निमणमाळ्यामध्ये एक 2-4 सामायिक विहीर, एक IMDतली विहीर, एक वाकेश्वराच्या तिथली विहीर वगैरे अशा प्रामुख्याने कोकाटे मळ्यातल्या 1-2 विहिरी, असा तो ह्या सगळ्या विहिरी वर्षभर पाणी असायचं. आणि ह्या केवळ राम नदीमुळेच वर्षभर ह्या नदींना पाणी असायचं. वाकेश्वर मंदिराच्या समोरच्या किनारी अपोजिट साईडला एक जी विहीर होती, त्या विहिरीवर तर रहाट चालायचे, त्या विहिरीवर मोट चालायची, त्या मोटेची दिवसभर गाणी चालायची. ती गाणी लहानपणी ऐकत 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 आमचं बालपण गेलं. या आषाढ महिन्यामध्ये आषाढाच्या सुरुवातीला जेमतेम पाषाण धरण म्हणजे पाषाण तळं जे आपण म्हणतो, हे रात्री कधीतरी दिवसा असं ओव्हरफ्लो व्हायचं. तो ओव्हरफ्लो झालं की पाषाणमधली जे जवळपास 80% मुलं ही तळ्यागाठी जायची आणि तळ्यातून जे धरणाच्या भिंतीवरून उडणारे जे मासे आहेत ते पाण्यात यायचे. ते हाताने पकडणे वगैरे हा कार्यक्रम जवळपास पुढचे 10, 12, 15 दिवस चालायचा. आणि गावातले लोकसुद्धा भरपूर मासे खायचे. आणि त्यावेळेला हाताने मासे धरून घरी आणणे हा इतका आवडतीचा छंद होता की हे आत्ताच्या लोकांना सांगून पटणार नाही. अगदी घोट्यावर पाण्यात हाताने पकडता यायचे इतपत मासे लोकांनी पकडलेले आहेत, इतपत मासे रामनदीत होते, इतपत रामनदी स्वच्छ होती. नंतर कालांतराने जेव्हा पाषाणचा नागरी विकास झाला, बौद्धनचा नागरी विकास झाला, नंतर बौद्धन, यार्डियल, भुगाव वगैरे इकडची सगळी ड्रेनेज रामनदीत सोडली गेली. ती पाषाण तलावामध्ये ते सगळं सांडपाणी आलं. पाषाण तलाव मृतवत झाला. पाषाण तलावाचा नंतर जो काही शासकीय लोकांनी वगैरे ते गाळ काढणे बिडणे वगैरे करून जो धंदे केले आणि कधीही ते धरणाच्या पुनर्जीवनाचा प्रयत्न केलेला नाही. राम नदी हे अत्यंत समृद्ध नदी होती की हसत खेळत बालपण माझं त्या नदीकाठी गेलेलं होतं. त्या नदीची आत्ता केवळ मानवाने गटारगंगा केलेली आहे. आणि हे मी केवळ 60 वर्षात पाहिलेलं आहे, माझ्या डोळ्यांनी पाहिलेलं आहे आणि अनुभवलेलं आहे. बघता बघता आपल्या डोळ्यासमोर ह्या नदीचं आपण वाटोळं करून टाकलेलं आहे. ह्या राम नदीला जर का पूर्वीचं वैभव आणायचं असेल, केवळ आमच्या पूर्वीच्या बालपणीची राम नदी आम्हाला जर का आमच्या मुलांना दाखवायची असेल तर मात्र संघटितप्रमाणे प्रयत्न व्हायला हवेत. सर्वात प्रथम राम नदीच्या ज्या गावातून राम नदी जाते त्या गावामध्ये या राम नदीच्या स्वच्छतेचं प्रबोधन होणे आणि संघटितपणे प्रत्येकाने स्वतःला झोकून देणं हे महत्त्वाचं ठरेल. आणि त्यानंतर शासकीय ह्याच्यावर दबाव आणून शासकीय यंत्रणेकडून ही जी सगळी नदीत सोडणारी गटारं, नदीत सोडणारा राडारोडा वगैरे ते ह्या गोष्टी थांबवून प्रत्येकाने सामूहिकप्रमाणे जर का प्रयत्न केला तर पुन्हा जुनं वैभव ह्या नदीचं प्राप्त व्हायला मला नाही वाटत की काही अडचण येईल.
Like Advocate Kokate, have you heard about any pools and springs on the banks of the Ramnadi? Let us know. We would love to hear those stories. In his video, Advocate Kokate talks about the Pashan Lake, which is on the Ramnadi. If you sit on the banks of the lake, you will be able to see beautiful birds like the purple moorhen or a duck in the middle of all the water hyacinth over there. The Ramnadi has other lakes too, which Dr. Gurudas Nulkar is going to talk about in the next section. Dr. Nulkar is a professor of management at the Symbiosis Center for Management. His research and teaching is in sustainability and alternative economics for a sustainable planet. He is a founding member of the Ramnadi Restoration Mission. He is the author of 3 books and a prolific writer. In addition to this, he speaks frequently about issues of the environment with a diverse audience. Here is Dr. Gurudas Nulkar to talk about the lakes on the Ramnadi.
Hello everyone. Welcome back to this online conference on the Ramnadi. I guess many of you would have attended our earlier programs and would have got to know some parts of the Ramnadi. Today, I'm specifically going to take you through the lakes of Ramnadi. The flow of my section is going to be this. First, I'll talk a little bit about aquatic ecosystems, lakes and rivers, and then coming directly to the Ghatpewadi Lake on Ramnadi, Manas Lake, and finally the Pashan Lake. So, aquatic ecosystems, it's all about water. Water is the most abundant resource on the earth. 70% of the planet comprises of water. Aquatic ecosystems are divided into three types. So first is the freshwater ecosystems, which comprises of lakes, rivers, streams, snows, ice, polar ice caps, all of these things which can potentially be used for farming or for drinking. The second is the marine ecosystems. Now, these are the ecosystems which we cannot use for drinking water or for farming because they have a lot of salt content. So, they are the oceans and the seas, and some inland waters which have got very high salt content. And then you have the estuarine ecosystems, which are a mix of salt water and fresh water. So, you have estuaries where the rivers are meeting the sea, or you have swamps, you have the Sundarbans, all these kind of things. The aquatic ecosystems are divided into lotic and lentic ecosystems. Lotic ecosystems are essentially made of running water. The water is flowing continuously due to gravity. So they are the streams, rivulets, creeks, brooks, and rivers. Lentic ecosystems, on the other hand, are still water ecosystems. So they are the wetlands, the ponds, the tanks, reservoirs of dams, pools, swamps, and many other things. So they could be man-made or they could be natural. Let's look at a few of the differences in the characteristics between lotic and lentic ecosystems. So lotic ecosystems are linear elements in the landscape. Right? So they will traverse for over hundreds of kilometers. For the Amazon, the Nile, Yangtze, Ganga, they will travel for thousands of kilometers. They are essentially a unidirectional flow of water by gravity. Because there is a difference in altitude, water is flowing from the higher altitude to the lower altitude. So there is tremendous flow of energy along with flow of water. And therefore we can build hydroelectric stations on these. Because of the flow, it creates a morphology of the river. It gives rise to the features that you see in the river. It can cut gorges, it can erode mountains, it can deposit silt, it can do all of these things. And there's a variability in the seasons, and therefore lotic ecosystems are very dynamic ecosystems. So if there is a rainfall, then the water content is higher, and in summers the water content is lower. So it changes the river characteristics during this time. And thus, the flora and fauna are highly adapted to these changes. There is a flow variability by depth. At the surface, the flow is the fastest. And at the bottom of the river, the flow is almost static. So at the bottom, the ecosystem nearly turns into a lentic ecosystem. All the lotic ecosystems are interconnected, and they have a very dynamic relation with the terrestrial ecosystems. On the other hand, lentic ecosystems are seasonal or they could be perennial. They could be natural or they could be man-made, like a dam reservoir. So near Pune, we have the Panshet Dam, the Varasgaon Dam, the Khadakwasla Dam. All of these are lentic ecosystems which are man-made. The depth is the critical variable here. If you have a very shallow lentic ecosystem, that has completely different features. That has features like a wetland. On the other hand, if you have very deep lakes like the Panshet Dam, for example, they have different characteristics, and thus there are layered life forms in each of these things. The changes in lentic ecosystem are very slow over time. Unlike a river, because of the force of the flowing of the water, the river continuously changes its physical characteristics. Not so with the lentic ecosystem, where they're very slow to change. There is no flow, and therefore there is a lot of siltation into it. So there's a lot of water coming in and entering the lake, and there's a lot of silt which is deposited here. And because there is continuous evaporation, there could be a nutrient concentration happening depending upon how much fresh water it gets in terms of rainfall, in terms of springs, or in terms of ice melt. And these lentic ecosystems are usually not connected with each other. If they are man-made, they are connected. So if there's a dam, if the Khadakwasla Dam, it's definitely connected to the Ujni Dam in some way, but not for the natural ecosystem. So within the Ramnadi, you will see that the lotic ecosystems is the Ramnadi itself. It's a first order and second order stream, all which are coming and joining the Ramnadi. Then there are springs, which are also the lotic ecosystem. And the lentic ecosystem are the Khatpewadi Lake, the Manas Lake, and the beautiful Pashan Lake. This is a cross section of the Ramnadi from the source. So Varpewadi, near Varpewadi is the source region, and the confluence is with the Mula River, which is near Aund. So look at the difference in the altitude. At Bukum, it's about 2,300 feet, and at the confluence, it's about 1,800 feet. So this level difference, this altitudinal difference, is creating a flow in the Ramnadi, and this flow is stopped at several places to create these lakes. So the Manas Lake, there is a wall here. The Pashan Lake, there is a wall here, and that creates the lakes, the man-made lakes on Ramnadi. So this is a diagrammatic representation of Ramnadi. So the Jarseswar temple is where it starts, then it collects its water at Khatpewadi Lake. From Khatpewadi it goes to Manas. From Manas it goes to Pashan Lake, and from here to the Mula. So right now we will start with the Khatpewadi Lake. Let's look at the Khatpewadi Lake. This is the Khatpewadi Lake taken from a drone, and this is during the last monsoon, which is 2019 monsoon, and therefore you see it completely full with water. And this is a man-made reservoir with a weir on the Ramnadi. It was essentially created to improve the groundwater recharge for neighborhood, which is it was built like a percolation tank. Obviously, because so much surface water is just simply going to evaporate. It's not going to last too long. So very seasonal, relatively small and open area. So it's not too useful as a storage of water. The Khatpewadi Lake, here you will see some shallow waters, and here will be really deep waters. And this part of the lake, the water remains almost until summer. And this is the wall here, which you can see just partially here. And this is the summer photograph of Khatpewadi Lake. Look at the amount of water. It's just at the deep section where the water is now remaining. And all the shallow areas have got dry, exposed soil. And because they have dry, exposed soil, you will see nothing is growing here except some seasonal grasses. And here's the wall that you see here. So from Khatpewadi Lake, the overflow is released and it is then collected into Manas Lake. So let's look at Manas Lake a little bit. A Google Earth photograph shows the Manas Lake and the wall very clearly. This is the wall of the Manas Lake, and the Ramnadi is coming from here and here. So 2-3 places the water is trickling down and it's joining the Manas Lake here. So if you look at the difference between the size of Manas Lake and Khatpewadi Lake, so this is Manas Lake, and here you will see the Khatpewadi Lake, which is almost at the source region. It's such a small reservoir of water, thus it can't store much. On the other hand, Manas Lake can store a lot of water, and you will notice that if you're traveling to Pirangut during the summers, there is some amount of water left in Manas Lake. So Manas Lake essentially is a wall which is built here, and the water is retained behind this wall. Again, you will see a similar morphology like the Khatpewadi Lake. The deep waters are here and the dry exposed soil is here. This is again a summer photograph of the Manas Lake. If you look at a monsoon photograph, all of this will be covered with water. Right? And this lake is largely used for recreation. So there's a fair amount of boating which happens, and there are resorts around here. So there's a lot of waste and drainage which comes into the lake, and thus the lake's nutrient starts increasing over time. And there is evaporation. There's not much water coming in throughout the year except for the monsoon, and it starts concentrating. So last we come to the most beautiful lake on the Ramnadi, or should I say, it was a very beautiful lake once upon a time. So this is the Pashan Lake, and this is the largest lake on Ramnadi. You will see the Ramnadi coming from here. This is HAMRL, this is Bharat Electronics, and it's entering here into the Pashan Lake. And you will notice that there's a wall here, and that's a very small wall compared to Manas Lake. It's a very short wall, but this is enough to retain all the water behind it, and that's how Pashan Lake water is collected. So this is the Ram Nadi entering into the Pashan Lake, and right now you will see it completely covered with water hyacinth. So the Pashan Lake is again a man-made reservoir by a wall on the Ram Nadi. This was essentially made to supply fresh drinking water to the governor's bungalow, which is in the Pune University campus today. It was once a thriving wetland ecosystem. So wetland ecosystem is characterized by a fluctuating level of water and largely shallow water, where the waders can come, where the sunlight reaches the ground, and where the soil does not go dead because it's very deep inside. And that soil is now able to harbor a lot of flora, and thus there is fauna which is attracted to it. So that's how it was once upon a time, and it's a relatively open area which attracted a lot of migratory birds, and I'll explain some of the migratory birds which were coming here a little later. Great habitat for fauna and rich source of fish and aquatic life. So there are still communities, fishing communities living around Pashan Lake who used to depend upon the fish life in Pashan Lake for a very long time. Unfortunately today they don't get as many fish here. The most important reason for that, there was a rich habitat diversity. So there were woodlands and there were plantation areas. There's a post bund stream, so there's a bund there and water is let off from that bund, and that stream is also very healthy, used to be a very healthy stream until sewage started flowing in it. There were marshlands in it, and there was a combination of marsh, acacia trees and bushes around the HEMRL area. There were areas of deep water, so there was wading habitat on the mud banks. And most importantly, there was no highway to the east of Pashan Lake, and therefore, whatever rains used to fall on the hills there used to enter Pashan Lake. So they're continuously getting fresh water whenever it rained. And there are a lot of studies done upon the Pashan Lake by colleges, by academicians, by researchers like Dr. V.D. Vartak and Vinaya Ghate. They have done a seminal study of aquatic vegetation where they found 78 species of specialized aquatic vegetation in the Ramnadi. They found ground orchids and mammals like the palm civets, the jungle cats, squirrel, grey mongoose, Indian fruit bats, butterflies like the plain tiger, striped tiger, dennet eggfly, chocolate pansy, what have you. It was a thriving ecosystem some time back. There were a lot of migratory birds coming here. The northern shoveler, the common sandpiper, green sandpiper, grey wagtail, white wagtail, three types of wagtails, the teals, the ashy drongos, the barn swallows, and there were a lot of resident birds. The waders, the drivers, the raptors, the kingfishers, the waders, the herons, the egrets, the painted storks. The divers were the diving ducks, the dabbling ducks, the cormorants. The raptors were the marsh harriers, and kingfishers. We could see the pied kingfisher, we could see the common kingfisher, and we could see the white-throated kingfisher here too. If you We compiled a list of all the bird studies which were done at Pashan Lake from 1982 to 2017, which is our own study. So in 1982, the number of species recorded were 69, and today it has dropped to 32. And you can see the comments which we have made here. It's based upon the disturbance. As the disturbance starts increasing, the eutrophication starts increasing and the number of species are reduced. On the other hand, we have also noted the flock sizes for selected species. So this shows that the pheasant-tailed jasana, it's a beautiful bird. There's a count of 5 birds in 1991. Today it's dropped to nearly 2 birds, and this year we have not seen any of the pheasant-tailed jasanas. On the other hand, look at the trend in the generalist species, the house crows, the large-billed crows, the common myna, the black-winged stilt, which is an indicator of polluted waters. This is continuously changing. Some of the qualitative indicators are the pied kingfisher. This is a beautiful black and white kingfisher which only dives into non-polluted water. So this was seen here. The black-winged stilt, on the other hand, is an indicator of polluted waters. The bar-headed goose. This used to travel all the way from Ladakh and beyond Ladakh also from the Trans-Himalayas. It used to come all the way. It's no longer seen. The skimmer, again a beautiful bird which just skims the water with an open beak. The greater snipe, which is also a very beautiful bird. All of these were seen. This is today seen. This was not seen once upon a time. So these are all qualitative indicators. The ecological productivity of this lake has reduced dramatically over time. That is what we find when we see these ecological indicators. And why did this happen? So if you take a bird's eye view of Pashan Lake, you will see that there is nature trail and plantations. There are bamboo plantations. There's a jogging track. There's a rock pitched bank, number 4. All of this is rock pitching. It has completely reduced the slopes and made it into a vessel. Earlier, it was a saucer where the waders could stand, the egrets, the herons, the storks could stand. Now, if you make it into a vessel, nobody can stand there. It will only attract the diving birds, which are the ducks and the cormorant. There are created islands which were created, and this was essentially a place for breeding of red-wattled lapwing and other ground nesting birds. But during the summers, the water level goes inside, and the stray dogs can just walk into these islands, and that because of that, there are no birds which are nesting here now. So all of this created a dramatic difference in the Pashan Lake ecosystem. So in the 2017 study, look at the amount of water hyacinth which we see today. Look at only the cormorants are seen here. All of this is changing here. We saw 110 plant species, but very few specialized aquatic species. Alarming drop in the aquatic vegetation species diversity compared to the 1981. Nilgiri plantation on one side has dominated here, and that is become aggressive. Regeneration of native flora is threatened. Sloping banks were removed, and therefore wader habitat has gone. And the pitching wall changes the ecological relation with the upland area. And now you can see a lot of invasive aquatic vegetation. Pistia, lemna, all of this are preventing sunlight from reaching, and it's creating a lot of problems. There are 4 recommendations which we have given for rejuvenating all of the lakes. One is several measures for improving the flora, fauna, and habitats. There are many measures for reducing pollution and controlling invasive aquatic fauna. So one of the things was to introduce reed bed water filtration systems, which are natural ecosystem biological filtration system. Measures for controlling human interference, what can be done, what cannot be done, and community participation in the program. So with these 4 things, we have managed to create a plan for improving the Khatpewadi Lake, the Manas Lake, and the Pashan Lake of the Ramnadi. So I hope with this you get an overview about lentic and lotic ecosystems, Ramnadi, the flowing water, and the lakes, the static water. And you will now be able to get a holistic perspective of the Ramnadi right from the source region to the confluence at Mula. Thank you so much.